like, I get back to coaching and I feel like, man, this is hard. I got to remind myself how to do it. And interestingly, like, you guys dropped this master's, out of nowhere, and I'm like, all right, I'm on it. Like, I got to get on that master's. Like, what's the philosophy behind, like, doing the master's? And is it everything that you're saying now, or are you trying to create practitioners that have all those skills that can do those things? Like, is that the thought behind it, or like, where you at with all that? Yeah. Not to plug you, I'm really just
there's
saying.
A lot there. It's funny. I was just having this conversation with our friend Ali, like an hour ago. So we're sitting in our friend Ali's studio, which owns a company called Secret, and we're talking about her designing, and each season coming up with how many different designs. Whether it's 5, 7, 10, 12, 40, or whatever, right? And she's finding now that it's much more. Like, she's more interested now in coming up with the 12 designs that everyone likes, that everybody continues going back to over and over and over again through the seasons. I have a point to this, and I'll come to where in previous years she would start on this path, and then I'm gonna come up with 12 designs, and think about your development, your learning as a coach. All of us, we all do it the same way. Our paths, our journeys are very similar, right? We start knowing nothing, and all we know is what other people do, and we kind of copy that.
Yeah.
Like you copy kind of some of the stuff you saw Dan do, or us do, or whatever, and then you go and have your own experiences, and your own learning, and your own reading, and your own research, and you add more stuff to the things that you know. And at some point in time, you've got this bunch of stuff. At some point in time, Ali had too many different designs, too many different clothes. And then it becomes a point in time where you say, all right, now it's about identifying the things that people are actually wanting.
Yeah.
Or in our case, the things that actually matter.
Yeah.
So what are the things that really matter? Let's focus on those things and throw out the stuff that, it kind of matters, but it doesn't really in the big picture.
Yeah.
Let's get rid of that. 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 And that's where mastery comes in, right?
Yeah.
So the master's degree. Mastery. That's why it's called a mastery.
Yeah.
You're becoming a master in this thing.
Yeah.
And what mastery is essentialism. It's getting rid of all the stuff that doesn't really matter. And the role of people like me, and like Matt Price and Matt Jordan and others who have, done this for a long, long time, is to point younger people towards the things that matter.
Yeah.
This matters, that doesn't. This matters, that doesn't.
Yeah.
Pay attention to this, don't pay attention to that. And that's what we see this program being. And not just this program, but every other program that comes from this. This is not just one. This will be a much bigger thing. We're trying to change the entire academic setup around sport performance and health within this. Right now it's starting off with this master's program in strength conditioning and coaching, but it will be many, many different things, including undergrad, master's degrees, and
PhD.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's that. It's just what matters. These are in our case, these are the 8 big things that matter. Let's really pay attention to these 8 things. Be as good as you can on these 8 things.
Yeah.
Understand and appreciate how they interact and interrelate in space and time, so that you can move into this community of sport performance and know what to do immediately, rather than coming from a typical quote unquote master's degree where it's just all academic. They haven't really there's very little studying of the things that actually matter.
Yeah.
Because we hear that all the time, right? From everybody that you've talked to that work in sport. Somebody gets a master's degree, they come in and start working in the sport, and they have to teach them about the sport, or working in the sport for the first 2 years. And that's why so many of the coaches have to start off with free internships for 6 months, a year, 18 months, 2 years, before anyone else will even hire them. Because the people who are doing the hiring know that your typical, more traditional academic route is not preparing people to work in professional sport, or even in high performance sport.
So is the target like creating, like moving the industry forward with like the right practitioner, with the right knowledge, with the right skill set, with the right like
100%.
mindset on it?
Yeah. 100%.
And then
Sorry, go ahead.
like from a learning perspective, like how does it, I mean, I never did a master's, so I don't know. Like obviously my family, my brother's done it, but like what does a traditional master's look like in comparison to like the ALTIS with, you know?
There's a couple ways to do it. In most places, you've got course-based or research-based. You know, you'll spend a year doing courses, and then you'll do your second year doing research or more courses. And you know, it's a very kind of siloed way of doing things.
Yeah.
And learning, right? You learn about this biology, anatomy, you know, physiology, you know, biomechanics, blah blah blah, and it's just, you don't really learn about what to do actually when you're actually in the sport.
Right.
Like, all of those things do matter.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I mean. The pain in your knee matters. Your knee
Yeah.
matters.
Yeah.
But how it relates to all the other things in your system matters more. So all of these things matter, but it's the interrelationships and the interactions between these things that matters, that really truly defines mastery in sport.
Yeah.
Think about all of the best practitioners, all the best coaches you know. They may not be, or they almost certainly won't be the domain experts.
Yeah.
They're the ones that understand how all things interact. They're generalists. Every single one of them, I guarantee you, is a generalist.
That makes sense. And like, all right, so walk me through it. So if I become a student, like, who's your target for students, number one, and then number two, like, what does it look like from a course workload standpoint? Like, how do you interact with and learn from that?
We are looking for students that are interested in working in sport, are interested also in truly understanding and learning about the things that it takes to be successful working in sport.
Yeah.
And maybe also understand, maybe intuitively, maybe more explicitly, that the typical journey isn't the way to actually learn the things that are important in sport. So those are the three things.
Yeah.
It's important that all of our tutors, all of our applied professors, all currently work in sport.
Yeah.
All of them, every single one of them. That was important to us. So you're being taught by people who are actually doing this as a full-time job right now.
Yeah.
So that was important. And the setup is looking again. There's 6 primary themes, and then there's a project, like a 6-month project, where you're taking all of those themes together and working in a problem-based way. Like this guy, here's the problem. How do we solve that problem? We look at this from a pluralistic perspective, taking all the learning that you've been taught over the previous 18 months about these different things that are related, taking those relationships and trying to solve these problems in interesting and creative ways that are real, authentic problems that we may see in sport. So that's kind of the overall sort of curriculum perspective.
No, I love it. It's crazy because it comes at a time where it's like, I think, and this is something I've heard you talk about a lot. Like in the beginning of your coaching career, you feel like you know the most. What's that called? The
Dunning-Kruger effect.
Yeah. So like, you go through and you have tons of confidence because it's like you're hungry, you're learning fast. Like whatever you read that day, you're applying that night. Like, and you go through this and you're working so often, you don't have time to doubt. You don't have time to even think twice. And then now, like, all right, I'm 35, so I've been doing it. This is year 11, and I'm like, man, I feel more like a beginner today than I felt 7 years ago, 8 years ago. And it's like, what's the next level? And what's like, how do I get better? So obviously I've been looking at master's degrees everywhere. Like, all right, do I need my PhD? Do I need this? And I think most people, especially my age group, are a little bit lost because like my age group is looking towards how to become a director, how to become the head guy, what are the skill sets that I need. And I think from a team perspective, they're thinking like, well, what should that look like? Like, what should a director, like, what skill set should you have if you're going to be a director at this level?
More letters after your name should you have.
Right. And I don't think, when I look at teams, I don't think they know sometimes, who to look for. It's just like, all right, well, here's your resume, here's who you've worked with, here's the projects. But a lot of times I'm seeing hirings happen because, oh, I just knew this guy, or that team won, so let's hire him. But I think the potential with this is like, now you have practitioners that have these very specific skill sets that you can now start to target for hires.
That's the next step, right? So the next step is we get this thing rolling. And the next step is to scale it out, zoom out slightly, and build these relationships with the people within the industry that are going to be doing much of this as well, right? So you can start these studentships within this. So maybe cohort number 2 is a studentship part of it as well, right? So you can actually be embedded within a team while you're doing your master's degree, and your second year project is doing work with the team. You know, so you're getting credit for that and actually getting paid. So that's, you know, that's where it goes for sure, right? It's really important that this isn't just, again, it always comes down to a system. This is an important component part of it. And I think we can do really cool things. But if it doesn't interrelate and interact with all of the other component parts of the system, we're not going to have any impact into the industry. To do that, we have to have the relationships with all of the sports, not just professional sports. Not everybody wants to work in professional sport, but all the community sport and all the other things that are going on that people may want to work in as well. So we are moving towards building those relationships at scale across the world in multiple sports at multiple levels.
No, and the last thing I'll say on this is, like, when you're in a setting where, like, you're working in professional sports, you're working with athletes, like, a lot of times where we're going to is, like, you're going to the Sportsmith, you're going to blogs, you're going to find information on the internet, and it could be difficult because there's so much information out there. Like, I mean, you go on Matt Jordan's website, there's tons of information. You go on Sportsmith, there's tons of information. And it's like, the hardest part for us is, like, well, what do we need to know? Like, where do we need to learn? Where do we need to spend more time? And I've found myself, like, different parts of the year trying to dive in and learn something, take on a project, then switch, learn something. So I think that's what gets me most excited, is, like, doing something like this. Like, I'm going to be challenged in areas I probably haven't spent a lot of time in. And, like, even just the foundation stuff, because what happens is like, if you don't have your master's and you've been working for 10 years, you're going to end up learning things almost backwards. Like, you're going to end up learning the very, like, complex stuff and then kind of work backwards to figure out what that means. So that's been, like, the past couple of years for me, which has been frustrating.
But all the best learning is that way. It's both top down and bottom up. It's both emergent and it's, you know, controlled. It always is that way. So that's not necessarily problematic, but for sure, without that top down, it's harder to make sense of all the things that do emerge.
True, very true.
And you know, like, there is so much stuff out there. And much of it is important, but just because it's important doesn't mean that it matters. And so it's not identifying what's important; it's identifying what matters. There's a difference there. And that's you know, that's a project that Matt Jordan and I started literally 20 years ago. You know, and Matt has a whole thing called What Matters, Measure What Matters, Change What Matters. Right? That's probably what he's best known for, and it's what we've been working on for, as I said, for a long time. We're writing a book called What Matters. We hope that's going to be done and out within the next 12 months or so.
How do you have this much time? Because you don't have kids.
I don't.
You don't.
Yeah,
that's
I
it.
kids. Yeah, I'm not like you. Got 9 kids.
Dude.
19 kids and Patty Price with 16 kids.
He is one.
Zero.
No,
So
for sure.
It's just, and I mean, Matt Jordan himself's got 3 kids, so it's not easy for him either. That's why it's taken us 20 years to write this book. But it's not an information problem. None of us have information problems. We have